Baseball, the first sport of the Puerto Rican people, avidly followed by thousands of passionate fanatics since its inception until the present. A long trail of unforgettable moments and memories, which have brought indescribable joy during victory and heartbreaking disappointment during defeat. This documentary about the origin of baseball in Puerto Rico is our tribute to all Puerto Ricans who have worn a baseball uniform and have dedicated their lives to mastering the amazing sport called baseball. Let's take a journey to rediscover its building blocks from its origin to the end of the 1920s. Baseball is believed to be a derivation of several bat and ball games played by the early British colonists. The origin of baseball as a sport dates back to the 19th century in the United States. Abner Doubleday, a Civil War general, has controversially been credited with the invention of the game in Cooperstown, New York, in 1839. The first baseball game, following the modern baseball rules, did not take place until 1846 in the Elysian Fields of Hoboken, New Jersey, when the New York Nine defeated the New York Knickerbockers during a 4-innings contest 23 runs to 1. Alexander Cartwright, who is considered the father of modern baseball, in 1845, developed the basic rules of the game and organized the first baseball team in history, the New York Knickerbockers Baseball Club. The beginning of organized baseball in Puerto Rico has been historically linked to the arrival to the island of a young man of Puerto Rican ancestry named Amos Iglesias Van Pelt, after his relocation to Puerta de Tiera, a neighborhood in Old San Juan, in 1895. During an interview with acclaimed journalist Luisin Rosario, in 1965, Amos Iglesias Van Pelt described his participation at the beginning of this historical moment.
I arrived to Puerto Rico in 1985. During one of my walks by Puerta de Tiera at the third trolley stop, I saw a man holding a bat and a ball. He caught my attention and I approached him. I asked him his name and where he was from. He said his name was Braulio Sanchez and he was from Cuba. During our conversation, he told me he knew how to play baseball, and also there were other Cuban youngsters in San Juan who played as well. He mentioned the Leon brothers and another Cuban youngster named Caballero, as well as others I can't recall. I told him my name was Amos Iglesias, a descendant from Americans, and I had just arrived from Brooklyn a few days ago. I asked him I would like to meet them to try to put a baseball team together.
According to the historical record, by 1897, a social baseball club had been organized in San Juan, and 2 baseball teams, or nines, as they were called then, were formed: the Almendares Baseball Club, integrated mainly by Cubans, and the Borinquen Baseball Club, composed by Puerto Ricans. Amos was also instrumental assembling several prominent citizens of San Juan to serve as part of the board of directors of each team and the selection of their owners, Mr. Santos Philippi for the Borinquen Baseball Club and Mr. Francisco de Alamo Armas for the Almendares Baseball Club. Once the board of directors were organized, these pioneers of Puerto Rican baseball began to learn the fundamentals of the sport by playing practice games between the 2 teams. The first practice game was held November 21, 1897, after the arrival of the bats, Spalding balls, gloves, and catcher equipment in the steamship Arcadia from the United States the day before. Several other practice games took place prior to the first official game between the 2 teams, the Borinquen Club, under the direction of Amos Iglesias and other youngsters, such as Dr. Manuel del Valle and Jesus Cabañas, and the Almendares Club under the direction of Caballero. These practice games took place at an open field near the San Cristobal Fort, called El Abanico, next to a walkway in Puerta de Tiera, which prompted frequent complaints from the not yet supportive capital citizens. By 1916, the renowned Carnegie Library would be built at this historic site. This photograph, taken several years later, depicts a small example of some of the other pioneers of baseball in Puerto Rico. Coached by Amos Iglesias Van Pelt, they not only were some of our first players, but also contributed to establish baseball in the country during 1897 and 1898. The engineer, Eduardo Saldaña. Judge, Ignacio Carbagira, Dr. Manuel del Valle, Enrique Gatelli, Jorge Colombani, and standing at the extreme right, the important sports writer for the Correspondencia newspaper, Base Hit, who along with Kelly Slider, were valued sports writers of this era, and kept the public informed of the developments in the sport. The first official game between the clubs was played on January 9, 1898, at the Velodromo of Mr. Francisco de Alamo located at 15 Stop, in Santurce. The scarcity of verifiable records have made very difficult to determine, with a high degree of certainty, the lineups of the teams that played this historical inaugural game, but we know 9 players participated for each team, although is not as clear the defensive position of every one of them.
Inaugural game between Borinquen and Almendares. The transit company listened to our petition and was able to make available enough transportation cars to the public to deliver the large crowd gathering at the trolley station to the Velodromo of Santurce. The godmothers of the teams were there wearing the apparel of each club, and the squads were ready to compete for their first victory. Unfortunately for all, and especially for the paying fans, the bad weather led to a suspension of the game in the 3rd inning, when the game was beginning to become interesting to all in attendance. Here is the summary of the 3 innings played. Amos, the affable pitcher for Borinquen, pitched very effectively and retired 3 men by strikes. However, deserved to be censured for trying to steal home plate, with bases loaded and a good batter coming up. Caballero, although calm on the box, walked 6 batters. The catchers played well. Leon, catching for Almendares, had several pass balls, and Cabanillas, catching for Borinquen, who was recently sick, still showed the effects of his illness. The Borinquen outfielders should understand that not all and catch a fly ball at the same time. Almendares improved throughout the game, giving the impression they will put a strong challenge to the expected Borinquen victory. In summary, the public did not yet understand the game, the players were deficient, the weather was infernal, but the umpire performed well. Base Hit, January 10, 1898, La Correspondencia newspaper.
Since at this time, there were no baseball facilities to play, the game was played in the modified midfield of a bike racetrack, called El Velodromo de Santurce. Baseball historian, Mr. Jorge Colon Delgado, through extensive research, has been able to establish the precise geographical location of the racetrack, as illustrated by this 400 meters track overlaid on top of the historical site. We can see him pointing to the location currently occupied by Miramar Plaza, and he has become a strong advocate in Puerto Rico to procure the designation of this important landmark in the history of our baseball as an official heritage site. On February 1st, The Liberal, a publication of this era, reported that on January 30, the first 9 innings complete official game had taken place between the Borinquen and Almendares baseball clubs, and the daily El País printed the box score of the game, won by Borinquen 9-3, establishing the traditional way in which the baseball games will continue to be reported. These 2 teams would kept on playing several baseball games against each other, while the country undergoes major political changes, which will reshape the history of Puerto Rico and the trajectory of baseball forever. After years of increasing diplomatic tensions between United States and Spain, on November 25, 1897, Spain approved the Carta Autonómica, which gave Puerto Rico the right of self-government. A transitional cabinet was established under the direction of Luis Muñoz Rivera, and assumed the government duties for the first quarter of 1898. Far from our quiet beaches and out of our control, on February 15 of 1898, the sinking of the American warship the Maine in Havana's harbor would unchain a sequence of events, which will halt all political, social and sports activities, and will change the direction of the history of Puerto Rico. On April 25, Congress responded to McKinley's request for armed intervention. And the Spanish-American War had become effective April 21, 1898, when the American Navy had launched a naval blockade against Cuba. Puerto Rico's attack began with San Juan's bombardment by the American Navy on May 12, followed by the landing of an invading force of 16,000 American troops by the Bay of Guanica. Despite the resistance of Puerto Rican and Spaniard soldiers, the American military superiority took control of the country by July 25, 1898. The commanding officer of the invading military force, General Nelson A. Miles, was appointed governor of Puerto Rico and continued the policy of pacifying and Americanizing the new territories acquired during the war. Baseball, which was a game played among the naval and military servicemen, was the ideal manner to apply this policy, and paved the way to overcome some of the psychological and social damages of the war. Once the security was re-established, baseball games began to take place between the military and the local existing teams. The sport of baseball had returned to Puerto Rico, on the terrains of the Castillo of San Felipe del Morro, this time to become permanent, and to be integrated to the cultural fiber of the Puerto Rican people. Amos Iglesias Van Pelt recounts this historical time for the sport.
We continued to play among ourselves until the start of the Spanish-American War. After the war, began the second stage of our baseball, when each of the insular government departments formed a 9. The teams included Treasury, Secretaries, Interior, Army and Navy. I played pitcher for Treasury. A few months later, the team changed its name from Treasury to Red D, and with that name we won the championship from 1901 to 1906.
Other teams of this era comprised the Naval Hospital Baseball Squad, Team Athenas from Manatee, Almendar's Baseball Club, Team Independence, Interborough and Escogido's baseball clubs, Post Office, and Commercial. The majority of the baseball teams at the El Morro Baseball League included local clubs or were formed by the troops stationed in San Juan, or the insular government agencies. Due to the higher quality baseball played by the Americans, teams composed of Puerto Rican and Cuban players would be organized to play against them. It was November 4, 1899, when the Almendares Baseball Club, reinforced by Puerto Rican players, Amos Iglesias Van Pelt and Florentino Lopez, defeated the 2nd Infantry Regiment 32 runs to 18, for the first time in the history of the sport in the island. This event was celebrated in all San Juan, and greatly contributed to attract more fans to the game. By 1901, among the Puerto Rican fans the passion for the game began to emerge. During a game between Club Almendares and the American Team Plaza, the Puerto Rican fans showed their disagreement with the umpire of the game, due to a call made in favor of the American team, by throwing object to the field of play, until the American team had to seek refuge inside the fortified walls of El Morro, and the military police had to restore the order. During this year as well, the first baseball associations emerged in Puerto Rico, and a very successful tournament was held at this baseball field. 6 teams competed against each other with the club Commercial crowned as champion. The event attracted a large number of fans and helped solidify the emerging sport. In 1902, the first triple play is recorded in the history of the Puerto Rican baseball during a game between the teams Independence and Curiosities, an unassisted play with the bases loaded in the 8th inning. Decades before playing a night game in the major leagues, on April 13, 1902, a night game was played in El Morro baseball field, when it extended into the night, and the fans illuminated the playing field with torches, until the game was completed. The development of baseball becomes evident with the emergence of several baseball leagues around the island, particularly where the American soldiers were stationed or the merchant marine unloaded goods. Besides San Juan, Aasbo was another town where baseball was introduced very early, and by 1899, the sport was taught by the American soldiers to the population. The first league established in Aasbo was in 1909, with the participation of 4 teams, including the Club Jefferson, the dominant team of this league until 1915, the Team Cambalache, the Club Marina, and the Club Maine. In this year, due to the lack of baseball facilities, several businessmen decided to build the Cambalache Baseball Park in Aasbo, and the club's Central Cambalache became the most powerful team. The quality of the baseball played in Aasbo was such that entrepreneurs and team owners since 1910 began inviting Latin American and American teams to play against the local clubs. These visits extended from October to December or January, and the tournaments held during this months were known as the American season. In 1916 alone, teams such as the Habana Stars and the Brooklyn Royal Giants, both from the Negro Leagues, and the Cuban Stars from Alejandro Pampez, visited and played against the teams from Aasbo. By 1924, the most powerful team of Aasbo were Los Lobos del Norte, named after the brave men known as Sea Wolf, the fishermen from this area. This team played in a new league and a new baseball facility, called Aasbo Park. At this league, the tradition of inviting great American clubs during the winter time to play continue. Legendary teams, such as the Pennsylvanian Squad, Allentown Dukes, came to play against Los Lobos del Norte in 1925, while the Dukes were touring Puerto Rico. These two teams played a 5-game series, of which Los Lobos del Norte won 4 of the games. Another important baseball league was La Liga del Castillo, which emerged in Ponce by 1909. This baseball league was eventually incorporated to the Charles H. Terry Athletic Complex in 1936, a sports facility named after this important North American educator and the superintendent of schools in Ponce, who made an extensive contribution to the development of sports at the high school level in this city. Throughout the years, very good teams came to play at this baseball park. It was at this league, on February 23, 1912, that the Ponce High School baseball team became the first all-Puerto Rican squad to defeat an American baseball club, the All-American team, while they were touring the island. With pitcher Lorenzo Roque in the box, and future star players, Francisco Siki Fabrier and Francisco Paquito Montaner, the Puerto Ricans won the game 4-3. This event was reported throughout the country and widely celebrated. By 1910, the first baseball park was built in the town of Caguas, where baseball had also become a passion among the population. A structure completely constructed in wood and the only baseball park with a 2-story grandstand. This facility was visited by multiple international and national teams. The Puerta de Tiera League, located in Santurce, was the next to emerge in 1913. However, since this league would become the most important of this era, and more details will be presented ahead. La Liga de Paris emerged in the neighborhood named Barrio Paris of Mayaguez in 1914, at the western end of the island, which allowed great development of this sport in this area of the country. Puerta de Tiera Baseball League was the most important baseball facility for the development of this sport in Puerto Rico. This league was located near the wireless naval station at the 8th train stop in Santurce, for which was also known as 8th Stop League, as well as the Insular League, because it was built as part of the Insular Fair of 1913. This was a Sundays and holidays league only, but it generated a great interest among the fans. The average fan of this era did not know the intricacies of the game, but they will cheer for a long hit ball, the excitement of a well-pitched game and the skills involved running the bases, all of what you watched in this league, due to the quality of the players and teams that played here. This historic league disappeared with the initiation of the construction of the Luis Muñoz Rivera Park, January 1, 1926. Many legendary teams called the Puerta de Tiera League their home. Some of those teams included the Puerto Rico Sports and the Team San Agustin, two great teams of this era. Puerta de Tiera League was the biggest baseball stage in the island between 1913 to 1924. Other squads and renowned baseball clubs that played in this league included the Borinquen Stars, one of the most complete teams of this era, and a great ambassador of the best Puerto Rican baseball, like we will see ahead. Team Red Flag, a powerful club, Team San Juan Athletics and San Juan Jr., two of several clubs which represented San Juan throughout the years, Club Arecibo Park and Club Jefferson, representing Arecibo, both dominant baseball teams, that travel by train to Puerta de Tiera to face the best teams of those times. Team Juncos, a club which became champions of this league, Team Jacaguas, a very early team from the great city of Caguas, Team Naguabo, representing the eastern area of the country, the outstanding Ponce Lions from the south, loaded with legendary star players, and representative teams from the western area of Puerto Rico, the Aguadilla Sharks and the Mayaguez Cardinals. Puerta de Tiera League was also visited by American teams touring the island, like the Brooklyn Royal Giants, and the Pennsylvanian team, Allentown Dukes. All the Puerto Rican baseball leagues counted among their ranked star players, but the Puerta de Tiera League had more stars than any other. Star players of Puerta de Tiera League included, among others, Jose Pepe Santana, known as the Babe Ruth of Puerta de Tiera due to his batting power, great pitcher and eventual manager, Lorenzo Roque, star first baseman, Francisco Ziki Faberge, Francisco Paquito Montaner, who in 1911 became the first Puerto Rican pitcher to throw a no-hit game, Rafael Mochila y Concepcion, a versatile player, who can play both as infielder or outfielder, Nestor Sabater, an outstanding center fielder for the Ponce Lions of 1923, Rafael Concepcion Covas, also a versatile player, who could play catcher or pitcher, youngster and future superstar, Emilio Mejito Navarro, who played second base and shortstop, and is considered one of the most complete baseball players from Puerto Rico, Francisco Pancho Coimbra, also a youngster at this time, and who was an incredibly versatile baseball player, being able to pitch, play second base or outfield, and who is still considered among the best hitters in the history of baseball in Puerto Rico, with a lifetime batting average of 337 and an incredible 2.2 strikeouts per season. Pedro Miguel Caratini, who played outfield and managed for the Ponce Lions, and is considered the father of baseball in Dominican Republic, and one of this league's first superstars, and Pedro Perucho Cepeda, who played as infielder or outfielder, and was considered the most powerful and dominant baseball player of this era, and an all-time superstar of Puerto Rican and Latin American baseball. Before its closure in 1926, two important tournaments were held at this baseball venue, both organized by the sports writers, who not only covered the games, but sometimes organized the tournaments or coached the players. The first tournament was played as Amateur Baseball Championship, resulting on a great success, not only for the number of participating teams and the quality of baseball played, but also for the large crowds. During this tournament, for the first time was officially recognized the difference between amateur and professional baseball players. The second tournament was organized by Jacobo Cordova Chirino, from the periodical El Impartial, and it counted with the participation of 6 clubs, crowning Team Juncos as the champion, led by the great performance of Pedro Perucho Cepeda. Again, large crowds of fans witnessed these games, helping to raise the interest for baseball around the country. The legendary Team Borinquen Stars. The Borinquen Stars Baseball Club not only was a great local team, but also participated in tours of Latin America. During a tour of Venezuela, the Puerto Rican challenged the then champion of the Venezuelan League, Team Independencia, by an open letter published by the country's press.
May 20, 1918. To Mr. Eduardo Montalban Jr., President of the Independencia Baseball Club. My very dear friend. For several days, the baseball team Borinquen Stars arrived to this capital city, which we contracted in Puerto Rico, and aware of the club you manage in such dignified manner, which figures at the highest standards in all your country, we would like to propose to you, by this letter, a match to be played next Sunday at our facility. Conditions and details can be finished at your convenience. Hoping to hear from you. Signed, Ida Zimmerman and Luis Lopez Mendez.
Challenge accepted. Borinquen Stars defeated the Venezuelan team twice. During the rest of the tour of the country, the Puerto Rican team lost only one game. The tour demonstrated the much more advanced tactics of the Puerto Rican team. After the tour was completed, several Puerto Rican players remained in Venezuela, teaching the country's players the Puerto Rican baseball style. Venezuela, over time, would become a powerful worldwide competitor in the sport. The 20s was a decade of great political, social, and economical changes and challenges for Puerto Rico. The Farragut Act of 1900, signed by then-President William McKinley, was the law of the land from the year 1900 to 1917, and the governors of Puerto Rico were designated by the President of the United States. However, the decade was characterized by the implementation of a new law legislated by Congress to reorganize the political and administrative relationship between the new territory and the mainland. This legislation was named the Jones-Shafrath Act, and it was signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson in 1917. Although the governor continued to be designated by the president, this law replaced the Farragut Act and granted United States citizenship to anyone born in Puerto Rico on or after April 11, 1899. The law designated Puerto Rico as an incorporated territory of the United States and designed the legislature of Puerto Rico at the image of the one in United States, established a Bill of Rights, and authorized the election of a resident commissioner to a 4-year term, as well as making English the second official language. These political changes, coupled with the poor economy and unemployment situation, increased the migration to the United States, particularly to New York, where thousands of Puerto Rican became residents, including many baseball players, where they quickly formed teams and integrated to the existing baseball leagues. Following the Jones Act, the Selective Service Act of 1917 enlisted 250,000 Puerto Ricans on the United States Armed Forces, of which approximately 20,000 served in World War I. During this decade, the island began the process of modernization. The appointed commissioner resident of Puerto Rico in the Congress, statesman Luis Muñoz Rivera, began promoting the idea of a Capitol building for the Puerto Rican legislature, and by 1925 its construction was started. The historic building was completed and functional by 1929, but its famous dome was not installed until 1961. The daily periodical, El Mundo and El Impartial, dominated journalism in the country, and WKAQ dominated the radio waves, being the only radio station of the island. Of great importance for baseball in the region during this decade was the emergence of the idea of the celebration of a Caribbean series. As it is evident in this article published by the journal El Nuevo Diario of Venezuela, showing the letter sent by the president of the Spots Writers of Puerto Rico, Mr. Carlos Garcia de la Noceda, proposing to hold an international tournament of the Caribbean between Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and Dominican Republic.
February 11, 1926, senior sports writer at El Nuevo Diario, Caracas, Venezuela. Distinguished colleague, I have the pleasure to share with you an article published in El Mundo newspaper, in our capital city of San Juan, which included a sports story on last Sunday's edition. After reading the article, you will become aware that the Association of Sports Writers of Puerto Rico Incorporated, which I preside, in one of last meetings, made the decision of promoting an international baseball tournament, with the participation of the champions from Venezuela, Puerto Rico and Santo Domingo baseball leagues. This championship, and the following ones, will foster friendship, togetherness, and interest for the sports, in addition to becoming a vehicle to increase the commercial exchange among the three countries. Each country will decide how their respective tournaments should be held, and how to host the decisive games. There is only one matter, which may make this task more difficult than it appears: the travel of the representative teams, to the country of the other champion.
By 1946, the Inter-American Series was founded with representative teams from Cuba, Venezuela, Mexico, and the United States. After its closure, the Caribbean Series was founded in 1949, with representative teams from Venezuela, Panama, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. The stock market crash of 1929 began the Great Depression, the worst economic catastrophe in American history. The Great Depression had devastating effects in Puerto Rico, leading to worsening unemployment, generalized poverty, and hunger. Banks stopped operating, and farmers went bankrupted. The emigration to United States accelerated, creating a great disruption of the Puerto Rican family life. The Great Depression would last for 1 decade. During this time, there was no money for the fans to go to the games, and the attendance suffered to the point that the owners had to add side shows, or began broadcasting the games in the radio. Despite the social and economic circumstances of this time, many Puerto Rican baseball players were scouted and signed to play for baseball teams in the United States. Puerto Rican baseball historian Jorge Colon Delgado has determined that the first Puerto Rican player signed was Jesus the Tiger Velázquez, who played for the South City Giants in 1917, a team which belonged to an independent Negro League. Once the Negro Leagues were organized, when promoter Rube Foster founded the Negro National League in 1920, was when several Puerto Rican players were signed, beginning with the pitcher, Rafael Cruz Lopez, by the Team Cuban Stars in 1920, followed by Jose El Gaucho Torres, who played for the Cuban Stars, and the Newark Stars in 1924 and 1926 respectively, Jose Pepe Santana, who played for the Havana Stars in 1924 and Philadelphia Giants in 1925, Nestor Sabater, Francisco Ziki Fabrier, Juan Sosa and Ramon Gulfucci, who were signed by the Newark Stars in 1926, Emilio Mejito Navarro played for the Cuban Stars East in 1928, and to close the decade, Roberto Concepcion Cova and Guillermo Angulo, who played for the Team Stars of Cuba in 1929. Another highly sought player by the Negro Leagues was Pedro Perucho Cepeda, who never signed with any team due to his rejection of racism in the United States.